And we are live. A very, very warm welcome to our wonderful speakers today. This topic is women in sustainability, and we are speaking to three women who have made incredible strides in this space and set a great example with their businesses, but also with how they are setting the pace for other small businesses to follow. And I know that many of you aren't small businesses anymore, or you're very, very fast growing, but Aisling from Sid Connects, thank you so much. Sara from Healthy Nibbles, Amanda from Naughty, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I would like to give you each an opportunity to share a little bit about yourselves and your businesses so that those that might not have heard of you can learn a little bit more about yourselves and your journeys. Aisling, can I start with you, please?
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle. So my name's Aisling. I'm the co-founder of Sid Connects. We're a women-led sustainability consultancy, and we really help businesses become a force for good. So co-founding Sid Connects, I worked in PR and marketing for over a decade. So I often say I'm the reformed greenwasher. So I've sat on the other side of the table, and I know kind of the tricks that goes on behind the scenes for businesses to try and get you to buy things often that you don't need. But there's also amazing businesses who are trying to do the right thing as well. So we help businesses become a force for good. I'm grateful to be here.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And I'm going through the B Corp process with Aisling and her community. So it's been a real eye-opener for me. And I know Amanda and Sara, you've both been through that. And Aisling, you're B Corp certified as well. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I'm just starting out at the beginning of my journey, and I'm in awe of all three of you because at the moment it feels quite overwhelming. But Sara, can I hand over to you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, so I'm Sara. I'm founder of Healthy Nibbles, and we really exist to make healthy, sustainable food choices the easiest one to make. And we do that through a number of ways. We work within food service, delivering vending machines and essentially unmanned markets, cafes, snack boxes and hampers. And then we look at the data around that and the consumption, and that's where we can see that consumers are wanting that more sustainable choice and that healthier choice. And we just want to make that easier for everyone.
Amazing. And we were just saying that before we went live about kind of the dire state of vending machines in most places and how access to convenient snacks often isn't or doesn't offer a healthy choice. So, Sara, thank you very much for everything that you're doing. I know you've made great strides in this space. Amanda, over to you.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. You've been incredible, Michelle, in your community, supporting Naughty and cheerleading. So super grateful. And most importantly, do blondes have more fun? Because I haven't seen you blonde before. It looks fabulous.
Oh, I don't know. I think it's the lighting in my office, but no, the verdict's out.
So I'm the founder and CEO of Naughty alcohol-free wine. We're making the world a healthy place, replacing every fine wine bottle around the world slowly, but not that slowly, with Naughty alcohol-free. So really, I was a fine wine and champagne obsessive, and I recognized that whichever way I cut it, my champagne drinking was not healthy. The alcohol essentially. And so I wanted to see if it was possible to replace the ritual. And we talked briefly, just before the camera went live about that placebo effect. And when you told me at the women's chapter events that everybody gets a bit louder, gets in the mood for a party, that means my job is done in that arena. And why can't you party without the alcohol? And luckily now with Naughty you can, and no one had ever done that in the fine wine business before. So we're making great global strides.
Brilliant. Thank you, Amanda. And yes, just to echo that, we serve Naughty at as many of our events as possible. And the response is always overwhelming. People are always asking, where can I buy this? This is amazing. I've never tasted this before. And I think, Amanda, you've really opened people's eyes to how much fun alcohol-free drinking can be, but also that it doesn't have to taste awful or be too sugary or sweet, because that's typically, and I know, Sara, you don't drink either, that most of the time those are the options you're kind of offered, are these very sugary, sweet, non-alcoholic cocktails, which are awful, mostly brightly colored. So thank you, Amanda. And I know you launched a red wine as well, which I'm sure is going to be very much coming to its own this festive season. I can see it there behind you. As we move on, I'm always fascinated about this, and I know the answer, but I would love you to share with everybody else that the majority of the businesses in our community have been founded by women who've identified a gap in the market, or where they had a need that they wanted to serve or to meet for themselves, but also for others. And that's one of the things that I love about female entrepreneurs, is that, there's always this kind of altruistic approach to founding businesses, that you want to solve your own problems, but you really want to help other people too. Can I ask you each to tell us a little bit about how you came to found your businesses and what need they meet? Aisling, can I start with you?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I'm like the reformed greenwasher, which I always laugh about, right? So greenwashing went into the dictionary officially in September, and it means vague or misleading information about environmental or societal practices. And so I've grown up working in the beauty industry. I've worked at L'Oreal and Estee Lauder and Clarins and all these big beauty houses, right? And the beauty industry is just, there's so much greenwashing in the beauty industry. So before we were all kind of thinking about the climate, the big example in the beauty industry is animal testing, where you would say, oh, this product hasn't been tested on animals, but all the ingredients in the supply chain have been. And then we mix it all together and put a bunny on it and say not tested on animals. And, when you work internally in these companies, you'd challenge that, and you'd always be kind of told to just shut up, little girl. It's like, don't worry about it. This is just above you, get back in your box. So I've grown up in the beauty industry, and then I had a complete career change and moved to tech, where I worked for a big Chinese tech company, and I lived out in China. And that's when I got really excited about sustainability, because there are all these tech solutions coming. And I decided to come back and do a full-time master's and retrain so that I could help businesses kind of sort this out. And while I was studying sustainability, I found out that one of the solutions really to the climate crisis is more women running businesses, because we basically run businesses more ethically. And so there's so much research on this. And when I went back and studied in 2018, I just couldn't believe it. Like, I was like, hold on, this is kind of total disconnect, right? And it was really exciting to be at COP27 on the ground in Egypt, because all of this research is starting to come through now. Like in the UK, women couldn't open bank accounts in their own name until 1976. We have so many systemic barriers to setting up businesses. And if we kind of get over those barriers and manage to get the funding and lift and support each other and grow businesses, then what we do is we push out unethical businesses out of the economy that are basically exploiting people and planet. So it's really important work. So that's why the businesses like Amanda's, like alcohol free, there just wasn't. I stopped drinking, a couple of years ago, and it was so challenging to not. And again, it was challenging being Irish. Everyone was like, "What's wrong with you?" You have to go past all of that. But businesses that are kind of creating those solutions to kind of bigger issues.
Amazing. And I love that you touched on the female founded piece, because obviously that's something that we are incredibly passionate about, and something that I feel like I've been standing on my soapbox shouting about for the last 8 years. And it's amazing to see now how many movements are in place. And it's interesting, because when we first started out our women-led campaign, the hashtag women-led, I used to have to type it out every time. Wow. Now, when I put it into Instagram or we post anything, it comes up automatically. And I'm just like, wow, that's amazing, because that means other people are using it. And that's great news for people like us, but also for women that are moving up the ranks, or those that have a dream. So thank you very much for that, Aisling. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about the female founded piece after that. Sara, can you tell us your story? Because you have a wonderful, sad story, but a wonderful story about how your business came about.
Yes, certainly. So really the idea came after I had returned from living in Africa for 10 years. Similar to Aisling, that I'd seen so many different things over there in terms of juxtaposition between wealthy and haves and have-nots. And when I returned, I really wanted to do something that actually meant something. And it was a personal experience. And through that experience, that's how Healthy Nibbles was created. So when we returned from Africa, unfortunately, my dad had cancer and he was in hospital. And for anyone that's been through that experience, you spend so much time in a hospital. I was there one evening, went to a vending machine at 3 o'clock in the morning and saw essentially a vending machine with a poster next to it saying diabetes and obesity kill. But there was obviously absolutely nothing healthy in there. As I walked back through the palliative care area, I just noticed just how much unhealthy food was actually fueling the staff and the team, and they're under such pressure all the time, and it's relentless really in those environments. And it just, that kind of spiraled between, you know, my dad having a preventative cancer, and the more that you look into cancers, the more that you can link them to the food and drink choices and lifestyle choices that we're actually making. So that was essentially the sort of snowball effect of the poster in the vending machine, the actual lifestyle choices, and then the realization that as I took that sort of aha moment, shall we say, into the workplace, that how much more we're expecting high performance from our employees and our teams, but actually we're fueling them with coffee, with Danish pastries, with bacon butties, and it, you know, they just don't mix. There's a really stark statistic that if you have something very high sugar, it reduces productivity by 66% for the next 45 minutes. And if you imagine your employee losing that productivity during that period of time, that's it's a lot of ill health that's going on. It's a lot of resources that are being underutilized just simply through our food choices. So that was the catalyst for Healthy Nibbles.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Sara. And Amanda, over to you.
Fascinating to hear both those stories, and I think you touched on that. I mean, whenever you lift the lid, you know, behind a woman's business, that why is almost always at the heart, and I think that can't be underestimated. And the more we share it and get the stories out here through organisations like you, the more the power becomes real. So my why really was fueled by a history of fun and frivolity. I was in the arts space, so I was back in the day, film, fashion, music, media, on the back of the boat in Cannes, meeting my now husband before social media. So that was a whole other world that I say to kids these days, you will never party like we partied. Now, yes, it was a lot of fun. No, it wouldn't be appropriate these days. But the point being, what was sort of ironic about that was my generation now has grown up all knowing that we really took that a little bit too far in varying degrees. And whichever way we cut it, I started to recognize that my champagne lifestyle, when I wasn't paying, I had, because back in the day, I was drinking the good stuff for free. I couldn't really ratify it with my upbringing because my mother had brought me up, really difficult upbringing, actually. My father was an immigrant. My mother was just trying to put food on the table, but she was very prescient, I realize now. Prescient, is that the word? Prescient. She really saw the opportunity for good food, you know, what's achingly fashionable now, you know, I suppose the farm to fork movement. She was trying to do that as a single mother to put food on the table. She was mixing muesli in her shed and delivering it on a bicycle. For anyone who's read the Gladwell book, I mean, she was the original entrepreneur, but way too far before the tipping point, because this was just really to feed me. And so there was this really interesting nexus where I thought, well, I'm eating this great diet because I've always eaten pretty well. I was brought up plant-based. I've really not had much sugar in my life, junk food. And then I was knocking back a ton of champagne, obviously first world problem. But it got me thinking, actually, not only is there a ton of sugar and chemicals going into all my favorite fine wines, also in 2022, fat fans, wine's the only legal consumable where you don't know what you're consuming, which is a pretty interesting stat.
That's amazing. I mean, that's crazy, isn't it?
The only legal consumable. So there's no ingredients list, actually. And everyone kind of goes, oh, wine's like alcohol and that's fermented and maybe a bit of sugar. And we certainly can't blame the consumer here. This is my industry that's really been hiding all of that. So it took me to Paris. I trained in wine. I mean, obviously, I'll truncate this part of the story, but the vision was really to try and illustrate what was going into wine. I started out in alcohol, and then the beautiful transition was to alcohol-free. That was actually the challenge, and the reason that I think no one's done what I'm doing before, which is launching really beautiful alcohol-free wines, is it's really bloody hard. And I hadn't really realized just how hard it was. It's much harder for me to make a beautiful alcohol-free wine than it is for me to create a beautiful champagne, which is kind of ironic, right? But I think the reason that my business has been so successful around the world, America's now our #1 market. I'm just back from the US, where we're all over the media, which is rather special, spreading the word. I think is because everybody was literally waiting for it. I mean, the vision is so clear. The future-facing way we'll all be drinking is we'll be recognizing that ethanol is toxic. We'll be recognizing that alcohol is the new tobacco. We'll be lifting the lid one by one on illnesses and linking them quite directly to alcohol, very sadly. And I say this as somebody who still loves a glass of champagne, so I'm not all didactic about this. I'm just talking about the facts. And so I think the visionary element of my business has always been clear, and wonderfully the world's waking up to it. So I'm super excited about that. And we put B Corp at the very heart of our business, obsessively focused on that from the beginning. But I'd say to everybody right now, it's really hard, and every day you're having to practice and work out what you're going to do better. And it's a huge weight on your shoulders. So don't approach B Corp just simply from a PR point of view. Because it's really hard work trying to do the right thing every day when no one's looking.
Absolutely. And actually, I think at this point it would be really good, because there might be people that are listening that might not completely understand what a B Corp certification is. And Aisling, I wondered if you can just kind of explain the concept, because this talk is about sustainability, and I know we're going to go on to next sort of talking about what first steps each of us can take and what you took. But can you tell us a little bit more about the B Corp concept and why this is such an important certification?
Absolutely. So I think first, it's really important to start with like the definition of sustainability, right? So because there's all these different terms, and sustainability means meeting the needs of the present without compromising future generations to meet their own needs, okay? So it means us being able to live today, and our children being able to live, and our grandchildren being able to live. And that's the UN and the academic definition. And there's actually 3 pillars to sustainability. So the first pillar is the environment, which is the one that everyone thinks of. When I was studying sustainability, everyone just thought climate, that's what she's going to talk about. So people always get the climate. The second pillar is the societal pillar, gender equality, Black Lives Matter, the mental health pandemic we all find ourselves in. And it's the third pillar that was kind of news to me when I went back and studied, which was this economic pillar, okay? And so one of the lessons of the pandemic, I think, is we've realized how much we rely on the economy. So it was a nightmare when the shops weren't open, like no one wanted to be furloughed. Society and the economy are completely interdependent. And then if you don't have the planet, you don't have all 3. And so when I was at COP27, it's like the world is in such a bad place, right? So there's environmental collapse, there's all these inequalities, there are so many problems that we're facing. But when you kind of go upstream a bit more and just stop looking at carbon, or stop looking at global north, rich countries and global south, you realize that they're actually not problems, they're symptoms. So these are symptoms of an economic system that is basically exploiting people and planet. So in academia, they have like 3 bubbles, and they'll have this economic pillar basically that is coming out and is exploiting people and planet. And as a species, we haven't figured out how to grow the economy without exploiting people and planet. And that's why it's quite interesting, when the politicians come on and they're like, we're going to grow the economy. Well, how exactly are you going to grow the economy? And so academics and kind of the UN really believe that the issue is that we need to move from a shareholder model, so making as much money as possible for our shareholders, to a stakeholder model, which means serving your employees, your customers, making food that's actually good for them, giving your customers different options, paying your workers fairly. And that's the whole premise of B Corporation. So what it is it's an ESG framework, an environmental, social, and governance framework. But really, it's about moving businesses from a shareholder model to a stakeholder model. And that's the kind of spirit of the assessment. And that's why it's such hard work. So it's not easy. It is really challenging, because you're looking at changing a whole capitalist system that we've grown up with, right? So you're looking at doing business in a totally different way, which to Amanda's point is not straightforward. So it's definitely work, but it's definitely worth it.
So my next question is, where do we start? I mean, Sara, perhaps I can start with you. And what are the first steps that we should be taking? You've obviously been along this journey, and I know that it's an ongoing journey for everyone. And I think that's the important thing to note, right? That, as you said, Amanda, once you start, it's not kind of a form that you fill in and you're done. It opens up all sorts of ideas and thought processes around your impact and how you can keep making a difference and be, having a real impact. So, Sara, what advice would you give to someone who was first starting out on the sustainability journey?
I think what you've initially touched on is so relevant, that this is not a tick box exercise, a certification process that you can file as a done. Absolutely not. And I think just reflecting back on my journey, because I guess in the whole journey, I'm fairly new at this, in as much as we certified in 2021. So we're only 18 months essentially in that post-certification journey. And I think reflecting back on that initial thought process is that you're never going to have it all together. You're never going to have all the answers. I was absolutely drove myself crazy just going around in circles thinking I can't work X, Y, Z out. So I think the first thing is just having that commitment that this is what you're going to do. This is what your business is about. This is where, but it can't be removed from the business, essentially. So that whole understanding that it's intrinsically linked to every single decision that you're going to make moving forward. Some things you're going to get right, some things you're not going to get right, and you're going to learn for the next time. I think, so that's kind of just an acknowledgement, I guess, to start off with. For me, I think making sure your team is on board, because if they're not, and you're growing as a business, then those business decisions that are going to be made in the coming months, years, are not going to be made with the same heartbeat and the same sense of direction. And I think that is crucial. It can be a procurement decision. It can be the way that an employee is spoken to and engaged with. And if those people that are leading those different departments and different areas of the business are not totally on board, then the heartbeat of B Corp or sustainability as a whole is going to be lost. I think speaking to everybody within your community, so your employees, your supply chain, everybody that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, speak to them and get their take on it. You'll learn things, and you'll learn what is possible in terms of, particularly for us, when we're tracking a lot of different products, we'll learn what is actually possible with some brands and what isn't possible, and where we need to look at change. And sometimes some of that change we've found comes much higher up. It's more of a sort of, should we say, food and drink sector change that needs to actually go ahead. And knowing your quick wins, I would say. There are things for us that were very easy to do. We already had very strong employee engagement. We had very, very strong supplier engagement, and certain aspects of our packaging at the time had gone completely plant-based, water-based inks, all of that sort of stuff. So we had some quick wins that we could immediately have in place, and then we could build out. But I think I was going to say enjoy the journey, but it's a very, as you've said, it's a very hard journey. And it's not to get overwhelmed, but to know that every single step is just working towards continual improvement. And I think that's the heart of it, is continual improvement. So whatever you did last, can you improve on it? Where can you not go any further, but where can you go further as well? So yeah, take each day as it comes.
And I would just like to add to that, because again, it's like collaboration really is the new competition. So when I go to all these UN conferences, or I'm in academia, they'll always be like, collaboration is the new competition. Collaboration is the new competition. But how does that actually happen in real life, you know? And I think that's what B Corp is also trying to do. It's saying you're now part of this community. And so whoever has already done the packaging solution, come and come and see what we've done. Do you know what I mean? And build on top of each other, instead of us all going down different routes trying to solve this. This is the latest. It's good now. It's not going to be good in a year's time. Do you know what I mean? At one point, plastics were a great invention. They're not a good invention anymore. We need to move it forward, but it's taking a leaf out of those tech businesses where it's open source and like building on top of each other.
I think that's so important. I think collaboration would be sort of, I would say, the single word that underpins everything that we're doing, because through that community, we are able to make advances in certain areas. And I think that really, really helps. And I know that through us becoming B Corp, many of our suppliers have become B Corp, even as smaller businesses and starting out. they've become B Corp, so at least they're starting that journey at the start of their business almost. So that obviously makes it a whole lot easier because you're not trying to reinvent something. I think just the power of that collaboration, that you bring people and resources around you, it really helps that journey.
Amazing, thank you. And Amanda, what advice would you share based on your journey in terms of getting started?
Well, I think going back to that point about the why in your business, the fact that when I speak to most women, the reason their business exists in the norm is because they're solving a problem that really they were affected by. So I think if you put your authentic self at the heart of that, then that may well be the natural way into exploring B Corp. I mean, I was already part of that sort of ecosystem in the visionary piece. I mean, I became really interested in Patagonia as a brand some time ago, and I think many people considered them to be the original, the OG. And of course, recently they've talked about this idea of not buying anything. You know, I think you have to, we're in this world where things become quite counterintuitive almost. And it's this idea of don't buy any of our Patagonia jackets. Well, why not? That doesn't make sense. You know, mend them because actually they should be good for life. And I think it's really turning a lot of our preconceived historical thoughts actually on their heads. And what's been really fascinating to me, spending time in the US particularly, is this idea that I'm part of the EY Winning Women Network, I think I mentioned, and that also links you up. It's an evergreen program. It links you up with all the big alumni. You have an equal seat at the table with the trillion-dollar businesses. And obviously, normally in life, the minute you say trillion-dollar business, everyone's like, oh my God, they must be doing horrendous things. And actually, to the contrary, when I'm spending time with some of the big winners at Entrepreneur of the Year, the global winners, you know, from Brazil, you know, wherever around the world, they're doing exactly what we're all doing on a massive scale. And I think now corporate culture is starting to recognize at the real macro level that what we're doing matters. And they're starting to actually cheerlead, conversely, the huge business that is doing good. So I see a lot of change going on in the world. I mean, obviously not fast enough by any means, but I think we've got to recognize that that movement is happening, not just in SMEs, which mostly have that at the heart, but also on the macro level. And we've got to celebrate that too. And so I guess the journey for me started, I'm a visionary entrepreneur. So I know what I'm good at. I'm amazing at taste and I'm amazing at vision. Everything else I need to surround myself with brilliant people for. So that's as much as my specialities are. And so what I always like to do is surround myself with other brilliant people who are smarter than me, who I can learn from. And so the way I approached it originally was really early days. I was like, right, I want to understand that. I want to get on top of that. Ex-journalist, so you want to understand something. Married to a publicist, so that's interesting. He doesn't greenwash. He's film and TV. He's a brilliant publicist, doesn't greenwash at all. So what I wanted to do was understand it. So I think the first step for me, I think a lot of people listening might think, well, I keep hearing about this, I keep reading about it. I would encourage you really to start to understand it, because there's no point going on the journey if you don't really quite understand the journey you're going on. So I think really, as we've talked about, talk to a lot of people who may be on the journey or have the certification, and talk to the big leaders in the group, like the Patagonia story, who actually have driven that forward from the US, interestingly. It's really big in the US. And we're starting to get to a point where procurement, not quickly enough by any stretch, procurement's starting to recognize that as well as buying from female-led businesses and diverse business, they need to also look at B Corp certified business. And in the UK, this year, we were part of a B Corp initiative where we had a shop in central London, but again, the shop wasn't selling anything. Naughty was in the store being showcased along with a lot of other really fascinating B Corp brands, just to start conversations, to talk about alcohol-free, to talk about the touch points. And of course, that's really just part of it. But there was a beautiful quote from Jamie Oliver, who said going on the B Corp journey was really like allowing somebody to rummage around in his underwear drawer. And in a business sense, it really is like that. So you sure as hell better recognize when you go on that journey, if there's something very awkward in your business, there is no point thinking you can cover that up. So this is where I think start by learning really to understand what you're signing up for, essentially.
I would like to say, because sometimes I feel like a therapist for businesses. It's funny that you said that about Jamie Oliver. Like, we sign an NDA and, you know, we work like that's the whole, the real difference with B Corp is that it doesn't matter the size of your business, okay? You can be any size business. You can be a sole trader in the UK, or you can be Patagonia, The Guardian, Coutts Bank is now a B Corporation, right? You can be any size of business. And basically what it does is it puts you on a point system. So just the way they want to see your money going up, they want to see your environmental and your societal points improving and going up year on year on year on year. And then you get checked basically every 3 years. And so, you know, we sit down with like huge multi-billion-dollar businesses and we sign the NDA, and then they're like, you know, be an amazing CEO, but he will be like, this is what's going on in my supply chain and I don't know how to fix it. Help me. Do you know? And it's like, how do we get out of this mess? And that's what we call retrofitting. But then we work with, like, you know, Michelle, who has set up the women's chapter because she can just see this need and is trying to really meet one of the Sustainable Development Goals, gender equality, which is SDG 5, and then 5.5, they each have sub-indicators, is equal female representation across all areas of business. And her whole business is about creating that and making that happen. So it's any size of business, you know, and then you're part of this community where you can really drive change.
I think that was really important to just remember. Michelle, I swear, right in the beginning, you championed me, really early stage. And I always think the people who've got your back before you're successful. Now, I can have lunch with anyone now, right? Back then, Michelle was championing me. And I think every entrepreneur really recognizes those people who had your back in the beginning. And I think Michelle does an incredible job. And we're all super thankful for that, Michelle.
Thank you very much. And I think, I mean, yeah, and Amanda, actually interesting, because I knew Amanda before she even launched. And I remember inviting you to a dinner and somebody said, oh, what business does she have? And I said, well, she doesn't have one yet, but she's pre-launch. And they were like, oh. So it's been amazing to be, you know, to watch your incredible journey, and so inspirational for women like me and those in our community to see what's possible when you really set your mind to something. And I think passion is a massive driver. But I think, Ashley, what you were kind of saying, and thank you for mentioning that, you know, again, that we're going through that, because one of the biggest eye-openers around the certification process for me is that it hasn't been about the size of your business. And in the cohort that I'm part of, there are quite a few businesses that have just launched, you know, or they're solo founders. And I love that there is this awareness and accessibility that B Corp tries to promote around, you know, you don't have to be a Patagonia, or you can really make a difference. And that very much from a women's chapter perspective supports our mission that each one of us can make a difference by just using our spending power or our procurement power to support fellow women in business. And I just see, we've actually had a couple of comments here, and Anna's asked the question, will B Corp even be a thing in the future, or perhaps it will just become the norm?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting one, because also we have this conversation with the 3 co-founders of B Corp, and it's quite an interesting story. So they're 3 friends in America, like you mentioned, Amanda, who had met at university, they'd gone and had huge success, right? One had set up a shoe brand called And One and sold it for like crazy money. Another was an investment banker, another one worked in operations, and they'd had all the success. And they came back and met up, and they were like, you know, we've had all this success, but the purpose, like in the US, the fiduciary duty of a CEO is to make as much money as possible for its shareholders. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is mad. Like, if the CEO is not making as much money as possible for his shareholders, he can in fact be sent to prison. You know, it's shareholder primacy. And so they were like, we want to kind of have success again, but we want to have purpose, and we want to be able to bring our whole selves to work. And so really in the US, it started as a legal change from a C corporation to a benefit corporation. So reporting on the triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit. And then underpinning that is this ESG framework, which they call the B Impact Assessment. And what it's trying to do is shift you from a shareholder model to a stakeholder model. So dependent on kind of what countries you're operating in, the legal kind of requirements are different, but that's really the spirit of the assessment. And so the co-founders are often like, You know, do we want every business to be a B corporation so that every business is reporting on the triple bottom line? And I think it goes back to what is the purpose, right? Is a business making money while exploiting people and planet? It's going to be really hard for it to become a B Corp. You know, it's going to be really, really, really challenging. But it's also about getting you on that treadmill of improvement. So you get to 80 points, and then you have to keep getting better and better and better every year, every year, every year. And it's all about growing your business as well. You know, they want to see you successful.
I was just going to say, thinking about your retrofit thing versus the beginning thing. And I think there is an argument absolutely to say it's much easier to approach it really early stage, because then you don't develop bad habits. You know, bad habits stick, don't they, for all of us, whether that's in our personal lives or in business lives. Once you go down one track, it's much harder to then turn back. So I would say getting involved right in the beginning is a really smart option.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sara, I know you are really passionate about the power of the SME. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think that ties in quite nicely about this idea that these journeys, sustainability journeys, are accessible to all of us. We just need to start. We need to embark on them. So, Sara, over to you.
I think that is so true, and I think so. One of the big hurdles around B Corp, and when we said we were going on that journey, was, but we're so small, and we're at this, you know, fairly early on-ish in the journey. But that was one of the reasons that we actually chose the B Corp certification anyway, was that it was adaptable to our business model, to our size, and to be able to provide that roadmap for growth. Yeah, I'm hugely passionate about SMEs getting involved in this. In the UK, 99.9% of businesses are SMEs, and we're employing nearly, I think it's 16.8 million thereabouts people. That is a huge catalyst for change that we can create. So I think it's just so important that we can encourage people that are SME business leaders to really embrace that role that they're in and believe in the possible of driving that sustainability agenda, driving the diversity agenda. It's just really within our capabilities. And I think what I find really incredible is that because of the vast numbers of those, there's different perspectives on everything. And we have, one of our values is to reflect humanity and the diversity of humanity. And I think that is what the power of SMEs have. You know, we are so diverse as small business leaders. So therefore, bringing that collective power together, bringing that collective thought process together, creates a catalyst for change. And we've got the power to actually move the dial quicker, quite often, than some of the bigger companies and the things that we so frequently complain about. Actually, we can do that as small business leaders. Yeah, really, really important.
I think that's a brilliant point, Sara. And also, I think what we perhaps should also talk about here, importantly, moving on, is profit with purpose, because I think the next generation are proving they will be buying from authentic business with real stories that aren't really screwing things up in the world. So I think what we've really missed in this discussion so far is the fact that actually it makes sense to your bottom line, it makes sense to your commercials, and it makes sense to your business being a future-facing business that is not irrelevant in the next decade. So I think the second you flip that model and you say to business, you know, even if you don't care about any of this conceptually, you care about your bottom line, well, then I sort of have to care about B Corp. And that really, I think, is the driver here. The fact that it is so relevant to your bottom line, big picture, and you will become irrelevant if you don't get on this train in the future.
Amanda, you're absolutely right. And that's the thing, like all those big businesses that aren't sorting this out, like they are squirming because they've got all the data and they know that their consumers are not going to purchase from them. And, you know, social media has a lot to answer for. It's not good in lots of ways, but one of the things it is good for is exposing businesses. Because I remember where I was working, I was at Estee Lauder when Twitter launched, and suddenly customers were asking all these questions and businesses were suddenly having to answer them. It was like, where do these questions go to? You know, before that, consumers didn't have that direct line in. And also, you know, this term consumer, when did we become consumers instead of citizens? You know, the language changed at a point, and it was a very clear economic point. Again, what is the purpose of a business? It's to make as much money as possible. That wasn't, capitalism has only been around 500 years. Before that, it wasn't necessarily that at all, you know? And so you really see this kind of youth generation saying, I'm not going to be just a consumer who consumes anything. I'm going to be a citizen, and I'm going to shop, going to choose where I'm going to buy. I'm going to go do my research and go right to the top. Is my money going to your business, which is actually trying to change this big issue around alcohol? Or is it going to someone who's actually right at the top, who's trying to keep us all drinking unnecessarily? You know, so they do all of that research. So you're absolutely, it's totally happening.
And I think, I mean, for me, just starting out on this journey, one of the most interesting things, and it's kind of, it just depends on how you frame it, right? Because I think I mentioned it earlier that when you first embark on the journey, it can seem quite overwhelming. But for me, it's overwhelming because I'm so inspired by the opportunities that exist that my brain just, and I think this is an entrepreneurial thing, right? Where we all want to have an impact. We all want to make a difference. And suddenly when you start to think that way, the opportunities to do so become exponential. And it's about kind of trying to work out how you rein those in and fit those into your model for now, but then also how you phase them in the future. So as much as it can seem like a really massive task to begin embarking on, actually from a business perspective, and that, you know, pays into exactly what you were saying, Amanda, it's really exciting because we're future-proofing our businesses. And with everything that we've been through over the last 2.5 years, it's definitely brought mental health and our longevity and our health into kind of the spotlight, right? And if we don't have businesses that promote looking after people and humanity, then really there isn't any place for us in the world. So yeah, I think for anyone that might be listening, you know, obviously you've heard Sara, Amanda, Aisling talking about this, and also for me just starting out on the journey, don't be deterred. Take small steps. You know, this approach to sustainability, I think, over the last few years has really changed in that you're not going to be shot down for trying. You're going to be commended for trying and for at least taking steps in the right direction. Aisling, I wanted to ask you, because you've just come back from COP27, which is obviously very topical. And I know that you said before we went live that after COP26, you were feeling really deflated, but you feel quite differently now that you've just come back from Egypt. Can you tell us a little bit about why?
I think the real reason is because we're really starting to realize that diversity, equity, and inclusion has everything to do with the climate crisis, right? So it's that Einstein quote, the same thinking that created the problems is not going to create the solutions, you know? And I would really recommend that if we're on Instagram, like there's a group called She Climate, it's She Changes Climate. And really that group of women are working at UN level. And what they're doing is really kind of envisioning a world where women in all their diversity are active participants in changing this economic structure we have, which will then in effect change the climate crisis. And that was really shining through. And you can see all the research says the same thing. And you have all these guys who absolutely are on this journey now as well, who are like, do you know what? We've tried and this isn't working. Like, we need more women. We need their point of view. We need to have a balance in this room and in this conversation. And so what She Changes Climate is trying to do is have 2 COP presidencies, a man and a woman, and not just having women there behaving like men, you know, who have the same thinking, but actually having inclusion where they can actually say what they're really thinking and have a point of view and dig a bit deeper and lift the lid on these big, huge societal issues that we're facing as a world. So I really felt that change, you know. I really felt that this time. I feel the youth, I feel women stepping into their power, not being as, you know, we have so many systemic barriers to setting up businesses and in every area of life, and knowing that we have to all just support each other to push through those barriers, because often the door is open now. It's ajar and it looks closed, but when you push through, it's actually open. So yeah, it's just about, you know, collaboration and lifting each other. So I definitely felt that this time. So I feel energized after this COP, which is great.
Amazing, that's brilliant. And for any women-led businesses that are listening or founders, and correct me if I'm saying this incorrectly, Aisling, you actually get a discount. You get an equity discount for being a women-led business when you go through the B Corp process, which I didn't know. And I was really surprised. Obviously, the fees associated with that all linked to the size of your business and your turnover. But I was blown away that I always kind of thought it was this big, it's unattainable, concept for me. And when you start to dig into it, it's actually really accessible. And the wealth of knowledge that exists just on their own platform, as well as this community support that you get from the other businesses, just like we're all sitting around doing now, which is brilliant, is really phenomenal. So I would encourage anyone, if you've got questions, and I hope this is okay, if you work in Amanda's sector or you work in Sara's sector, to get in touch and ask questions. But obviously, Aisling and her business partners from Sid Connects, they are 3 female founders that run her consultancy, to get in touch and ask questions. Is there any?
It definitely sounds like Aisling is providing an incredible service, because I think often you do need that help. It's not very easy to just do it as a founder on your own. So I think if I was starting again, I would definitely be consulting with you and your team, Aisling. So I'd encourage people to consider doing that.
I'd second that as well, because I did it completely on my own within our small team, and we had a very small team at the time. Long days were definitely there. So I think just having that expertise and the ways in which to present information would have been really, really helpful.
And that's exactly, so B Corporation have trained us, so we're B leaders, so we're trained by B Corporation to take businesses through the assessment, because it is American language, it's based in America, a lot of it's American language. The assessment is also always changing, right? So they're always updating it, because like we said, what was good last year isn't good this year, and big businesses hate that, right? Because they're like, the goalposts are changing. As smaller businesses love it, because they're like, we're improving and we're growing, and they can see the change. So like I said, we're trained by B Corporation to kind of constantly take businesses through it. So by the time they get to be assessed, they have the best policies in place. We've basically been like, here's the heavy lifting of the work, so you're not on your own. So you have a diversity, equity and inclusion policy, so you know what greenhouse gas emissions are, so all these things that are very challenging for SMEs. We've kind of figured it out for you. And we also, which is something Michelle is joined, is we have these group sessions now, which we've started, which are mainly female founders. So instead of, we take, businesses through it on a one-to-one, if they have the time, and if they don't have the time, but they have the cash, we can help them and take them through it, where we do all the heavy lifting. Or we do these group sessions where we have about 10 businesses together, and it's an hour a week over 10 weeks. And we all learn and kind of grow from each other and share. So it's working well, but it isn't a straightforward journey, and it often takes longer, or, you've got to kind of make your business grow as well. That has to be a priority. B Corp often say no margin, no mission. So they want you to be successful. They just want you to embed those good things in.
Yeah, and I think on that note, I'd got my business profitable before the macroeconomic issues, but on lots of private founder groups, particularly in the UK at the moment, it's a real struggle for SMEs. And so I think we shouldn't underestimate. It's all very well as saying about B Corp. First of all, focus on making sure your business is strong, is profitable, deal with all of those bigger issues to make sure you survive your current problems if you're having a struggle at the moment, like a lot of businesses are, because otherwise this is going to take up a lot of time. So I think you need to get all your ducks in the row, make sure you've got a solid business that, before you look at embarking on this, or early stage. But I'm just recognizing empathetically the struggles collectively that British business is having at the moment with everything that's going on, and not just politics, but with the economic climate.
Absolutely. I would say first step is to just download the B Impact Assessment. It's free. So just download it. If you've got some time, look through it, see how you're feeling. And that's kind of step number one. Just get under the lid of B Corp. It's totally free. And you can just, have a play around with it. You can't make a mistake. So just have a look, see how you're feeling, and then just take it step by step.
Amazing. Thank you. And it's been such an honor to have all of you here today. And Amanda and Sara, both of you are living examples for women, but for business owners in general, of how sustainable businesses like yours can scale and grow. I know both of you are on very fast tracks, and it's been wonderful to be watching from the sidelines and be inspired by everything that you have both achieved. So thank you so much for making the time, all of you, to come on today, share your insights, and be seen and set an example for so many of us that are looking for inspiration and a light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you so much. Aisling, for all of your insights as well. It's been wonderful. You've really opened my eyes to what it means to be sustainable, and I'm really excited about the concept. So as much as my business is, obviously service-based and very small, it's still super exciting. And I look to people like Amanda and Sara who have supply chains and suppliers, and I just think, wow, what you've achieved is incredible. So thank you so much. If anyone has come in halfway through and you've missed our conversation, you can watch this from the beginning. It will sit on LinkedIn under this event banner, but it will also be downloaded, and you'll be able to find it on our YouTube channel or on our website within the next couple of days. And if you found this useful, please do share it. Share the stories of Aisling, Amanda, and Sara. Visit their websites. I'm a massive fan of Naughty, as you know. I love Sara. Sara stocks and puts together boxes of all of my favorite healthy snacks, many of whom are women-led businesses, which is really cool, and I love that. So please do check them out. And if you're looking for help along the journey, get in touch with Aisling and Sid Connects. I can't recommend them highly enough. All of you are women's chapter members, and I'm very grateful to have you in our community. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you. Great to see you all.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers. Thank you.